Greetings and salutations, my favorite people on the entire planet. I am Shredlord. We are Thralls of Metal. And another year has gone by, and that means it's time for another year-end review list. Now, Necrotic does probably he could do a top million if he wanted to. I know John did 40. I believe Captain Rinford McGillicuddy, he will do 20, I think. I'm only going to do 10. It is what it is, but I don't also want to have a list filled with fluff. I didn't listen to nearly as much. I don't think anyone listens to as much music as Necrotic. John usually can come in pretty close, but I find that I find things that I like and I really stick on them hard, and then I move on to the next thing I like and really listen to that until my eardrums are sick of it. So I might not be as varied as some of my other cohorts, but I am just as passionate about the 10 that I picked here today before you. Now, before I get started in my list, with that being said, another year down in the books, thank you to everyone. I am so appreciative of the fact that I even get to sit here in this basement, higher than Giraffe Pussy, making this video for you, talking about shit that I just like, metal music. So, to everyone that gives a shit, I know we thank you all the time, but I don't think enough thanks can be given, so just deal with it. You're gonna be praised, damn it, and like it. So thank you. I'm thankful for all you guys, and let's get into my list. So I did a top 10, and the number 10 on my list was a band I had never even heard of before this year, and then when I researched them, they were literally a band that only has 2 albums, and the first one came out in 2020. Worm, Foreverglade. Now, once again, I'd never heard of these guys before at all, but when I listened to this, I was just enamored with its blend of death metal and really melodic guitar work. This is just 6 tracks of pure, heavy, and evil, and it is fucking awesome. I can't wait to hear the next thing that these guys put out, and I think that this is a pretty special record considering it made it into my top 10, and I had never even heard of these guys, nor did they have a giant discography at this point. Worm, you guys kick ass. Can't wait to hear the, not sophomore effort, so it would be the junior effort if we're going by college rules. I don't know, the 3rd album. Let's move on. Now, if you're a young metalhead back in the 90s, a very important band around that time would be At the Gates. Obviously, Necrotic and I have talked about the impact of Slaughter of the Soul that it had on melodic death metal. A lot of my favorite melodic death metal bands drew influence from these guys. They are some of the OGs of it all. And this year they came out with kind of somewhat of a comeback album. I don't know what it is or how you would classify that, but what I will say about it is it really blew me away, and I was very surprised at some of the new creativity and some of the new sounds that found itself on this album. It wasn't a straight Slaughter of the Soul type album. It had draws to some of the earlier At the Gates, but it also combined a lot of new epicness and some keyboard type stuff. Really, it added a new, I don't want to say power metal, but it had a lot more keyboard-driven atmosphere and stuff, and I thought it sounded really incredible. And anytime those guys put out music, I'm always interested to hear it, and this album was fucking killer. I thought this was a good album for them not putting out one in quite some time. Now, if you know me, you know that I do love me some black metal, and 2 of my favorite black metal people of all time would be Fenriz and Nocturno. They are the Gruesome Twosome. They are pretty much royalty as black metal as far as I'm concerned. I love Darkthrone. Very rarely can they do anything wrong in my eyes. So when Eternal Hails came out, Necrotic and I listened to it, and I fucking love this album. I thought this album was sweet. Once again, just like Foreverglade, it wasn't a very multiple tracked album, I should say. You know, only 5 tracks on here, but I mean, with lengths of 7 minutes, 9 minutes, 8 minutes, 9 minutes, 7 minutes. There's plenty of music on here, and if you know anything about these guys, the great thing about Nocturno and Fenriz is I don't think you could ever accuse them of doing the exact same album twice, although they still have a style that you can instantly recognize. The creativity continues to grow, and one thing I love about these guys in Darkthrone is that as they continue to age, they become better players. And so while it may not always be cool to be good players in black metal, when you are, it just sounds better to me. I don't know. Go ask Ghoul, who's now in Mayhem. How gross does Mayhem sound with a guy like that playing even some leads and shit in the band? That's all I'm saying. A little technical prowess can go a long way. But regardless, this album kicks ass. If you're a fan of black metal at all or know anything about Darkthrone, you should definitely give this a listen. Number 7 on my list is one of my favorite, if not my favorite metal band of all time. If I had to pick my favorite metal bands of all time, it would be a two-way tie between Black Sabbath and Iron Maiden. To me, those two bands are about as metal as it gets for various differing reasons, and it covers a lot of genre as well. But you can probably guess where I'm going with this, because one of the two bands put out a new album this year, and that is, of course, Iron Maiden with Senjutsu. Now, the story with this album, real quick, is that they damn near sat on it for a year or two, kept it quiet, and then released it. But some really strong, powerful songs stuck out of it. Two things jumped out at me when I listened to this album. Number one, Bruce Dickinson is singing his balls off. He is really pushing himself, and you can tell that he still tries really hard even as he ages and his voice isn't as strong or as powerful as it used to be. The other thing is, Adrian Smith is a badass. He came alive all over this record, whether it was leads, songwriting, or riffs. His creativity and his desire to continue growing as a musician and a guitar player is what continues to bring some new life to Iron Maiden, in my opinion. Dave's a great player, okay? I like Yannick Gers, but I would not say that I'm a fan of his lead work just because of how sloppy it can be and out of key and this, that, and the other, whatever. That's a conversation for a whole nother video maybe we'll have. But going back to Dave. Dave is an amazing lead guitar player. I love Dave Murray to death. I worship the ground he walks on. But Dave Murray's style has always been the same. Adrian Smith has a style that is his own, and you can very much distinctly hear it's him, but he always is pushing himself, even back to albums like A Matter of Life and Death, where he would put on a Digitech wah pedal to get some real wild, almost Tom Morello kind of spikes in his lead playing, just to give it a little bit of a different sauce. And that was all over this album as well. So I believe it was an upgrade from the last album, Book of Souls, that they previously put out. Did this album blow me away compared to some of the other favorite Maiden albums of mine? Absolutely not. But this album is definitely an improvement in songwriting and effort and playing, in my opinion, from its predecessor, Book of Souls. Number 6. Hell, I have to say it, 6. This next album is my number 6, and it is Hooded Menace, The Tritonus Bell. Now, the thing about Hooded Menace is I discovered them a couple years ago, and I thought they were some of the coolest, heaviest, just like doom death shit I have ever heard. I forget it starts with an O, forgive me, Necrotic would know it. But the album that came out in 2018, I believe, was the first time I heard of them, and I fell in love with them instantly. And then I heard the single Blood Ornaments off of this album, and I loved it, but it sounded a lot different. And upon doing some reviewing of this album, come to find out that Andy LaRocque from King Diamond, Death, all that other stuff, guitar god and pretty much a production wizard, he stepped in here and did production, and I believe he even did a lead on this, and he almost, I don't know if it was on purpose or not, but there is a very King Diamond-y feel to this album that never really was into their style. Now, if they would have came out with some kind of an album that sounded just like the 2018 album that I listened to when I first got into them, I would have loved it. But I love this as well. It was a new color to their sound and something a little bit different. It added a little bit of old schoolness and a little bit of epicness to what they already have going on. Chime Diabolicus. That was the first track, I believe, that they released, and then Blood Ornaments. If you want something to see if you're gonna like this album, check out those two tracks. The whole album is filled with songs just like this that just kick ass, and this is a great listen to for anyone who is into heavy melodic metal. Halfway through the list, and damn, I'm feeling great. Number 5, one of my favorite progressive metal bands of all time. Their guitar player is one of my biggest heroes on guitar. That is, of course, John Petrucci. That band, of course, is Dream Theater. The album, A View from the Top of the World. This just recently came out, and this was an album I've been waiting Dream Theater to do for a long time. When it comes to albums like the concept album, The Astonishing, stuff like that doesn't really get me excited when it comes to Dream Theater anymore. I long for the days of Awake, Images and Words, Metropolis. Those were some of the golden eras. Even stuff like Systematic Chaos. Systematic Chaos is one of my favorite albums. But those had Mike Portnoy in it, and I hate to turn this into one of those conversations, but I have to. This album seems to be much more aggressive, and songs like The Alien, not Invisible Monster, Awaken the Master, just some of the 7/8 string guitars on there, the heaviness, the riffs, some of those raw Mesa Boogie, you know, like old school, just kind of heavy scoop mid kind of sound. It was nice to hear Petrucci riffing out, and it was nice to hear him just playing leads. You know, when it comes to the musicality, it's never going to be bad. When I listen to a Dream Theater album, I listen for 2 things. How's James LaBrie sounding? And what is he singing over top of what they're playing? And does this sound like something that they really put some effort into, or does this sound like something else that I've already heard on a Dream Theater album? I think that James LaBrie sounds really, really good on this album, and I think that this was much more creative. I even like the previous album, but the past few Dream Theater albums felt like maybe the songwriting element was missing Mike Portnoy. John Petrucci probably writes most of the material now, I would guess, with Jordan Rudess. But I really feel like, once again, without turning it into this conversation and spending too much more time on it, that Mike Portnoy's songwriting and his viewpoints are an element that I truly miss in Dream Theater. And while I don't know if it'll ever happen again, they still put out quality, high quality music such as this. And if you're a fan of some of the older, heavier Dream Theater, this album is something you should pick up. Number 4. This band is from England. They are a 3-piece. Their bass player sounds like a heavy metal troll. Their guitar player is a blonde, flowing, maned, Les Paul wielding god named Bill Steer. And that band, of course, is Carcass. The album, Torn Arteries. I fucking love this album from start to finish. This album was almost like an encyclopedia of the career of Carcass. Many sounds from the many different albums and stylings that this band has put out. This band, again, is one of those bands where they've never really put out the same album twice. And while they have a limited discography, they put out quality albums. And this album is no different. Now, Carcass hadn't put out anything since Surgical Steel all the way back, and God knows when. I'm terrible with dates. I burned out my brain cells. But it's been a long time. And when one of your favorite bands decides to put out an album after a long time, there is always a fear that it's going to suck. Let's be honest. There's always that fear that it's going to suck. I didn't have that fear with them. There used to be a saying back in the day, "In flames we trust." And long has that gone out the window. There's a new saying, and it's "In Carcass I trust," because every album they've ever put out, I pretty much enjoy. Even if it's not one of my favorite albums, I can listen to it. There's only one album of theirs that I might not be so hip to listen to, and that's the very first one. Other than that, I'll headbang to all of it and just let the goosebumps fly. They are a consistent powerhouse, legendary band, and this album showcases all the different things that they're capable of doing within the genre of heavy metal. Well, here we are. Top 3. Look at you. You dirty, dirty you. So dirty. You look like you need to be cleaned with my top 3. So, let me quit smooth talking you and get right into it. So my number 3 comes from a legendary death metal band. The textbook definition of death metal. That is, of course, Cannibal Corpse. The album is Violence Unimagined. What a mother trucking ripper from start to finish. First of all, let's talk about the whole Pat O'Brien thing. We actually saw one of the very last concerts with Cannibal Corpse with Pat O'Brien here in Toledo before all the craziness ensued, and we didn't know what was going to go on. And as much as I love Pat O'Brien, I got to tell you, when I found out Eric Rutan was going to be a full-time member of Cannibal Corpse, I pretty much shit my pants. Eric Rutan is a underrated, unsung guitar god of death metal. His band, Hate Eternal, is fucking awesome, and he has produced many a things in the past and played many a killer lead on many a great metal album. So I think his injection into Cannibal Corpse created an album like Violence Unimagined that combined a lot of clean technical prowess. Corpse Grinder continues to just fucking be consistent as hell, man. He is just the quintessential death metal vocalist. He does it right, he does it all night, and he does it with that gigantic fire hydrant of a neck. This album, along with the leads of Eric Rutan, blow my mind. I find myself, this came out, when did this come out? It was earlier this year. But still, here in December, I find myself constantly going back to it, even though almost an entire year's worth of shit has fallen upon us. Number 2, How Do You Do? Lucky Lou, Lunar Blue. That was a poem by Bev Poems. Hi, I'm Dr. John Brule. Nah, I'm just kidding, although that show's amazing. But seriously, my number 2, Mastodon. With the passing of their longtime manager, they decided to dedicate this whole album to him. If you watched our review, you kind of know that and a little bit more about it. But I was a little worried when I first saw this because it was a double album. And a band like Mastodon is incredibly talented. But you didn't know, hearing that there's going to be this double album, did they bite off much more than they could chew? The answer is no. They chewed it all. This album is absolutely incredible. The 2 discs seem to be a contrast to each other in terms of, I feel like disc 1 has a certain new kind of creativity to a lot of songs that I haven't heard in Mastodon before, and I feel like disc 2 is more of a traditional type Mastodon album. So it's almost like we were treated with 2 albums in one, both albums being solid albums. With the passing of their longtime manager, I feel like I can hear the effort, the creativity, and the passion in which they wrote and recorded these songs. And I was enamored with this the entire listen. I knew probably, let's see, which one is that? Sickle and Peace. By the 3rd track in, I knew that this was something really special. Although I wasn't 100% ready to say that disc 2 was going to be killer yet, because I'd heard disc 1 and said, oh man, this is excellent. But then in the back of my mind, I go, well, where are we going to go from here? Because they've already given us, a heck of a lot of great tracks. Now there's a whole other disc. Is this just going to be filler? What's this going to be? No, it wasn't filler. It was high quality Mastodon, kicking ass, firing on all cylinders. The vocals on this one were really cool. The more Bran and Troy sing, the more I like it. As much as I love my boy, Mr. Face Tat himself, Brent, I don't always feel like every Mastodon part would sound good with his vocal stylings there, because he has almost kind of a country, like almost like a yarl, like a gravelly yarl kind of a sound to his voice, whereas Troy has this bellowing wizard voice and Bran just has this like real melodic kind of soft voice. Troy and Bran together are good with sparing bits of Brent. That vocal recipe on this album also, in my opinion, led to its great success for me. I think that having multiple people sing in a band is awesome, and I love throughout their career hearing them change up who sings what and this, that, and the other. But sometimes I feel like a part should have somebody else and it would sound better. And on this, I felt like they hit every single selection of which vocal went where out of the park. So if you're a fan of progressive rock metal at all, if you're a fan of Mastodon at all, this is a must listen to. And if you haven't, shame on you. You should be peed on in a cage. And if you want to do that, email Thralls of Metal and we'll see what we can do. I'm just kidding, but seriously, I'll see what I can do. Well, that leads me to only one left. Once again, this list wasn't going to be a gigantic list, but I didn't want it to be filled with crap I didn't listen to that much or don't continue to listen to that much. Once again, these are all albums that I continue to listen to here in late December. So, with that being said, let's go on, and I would love to talk to you about my favorite album of 2021. This band is one of probably my second, behind Dream Theater, probably my second favorite progressive metal band. I've seen them going, it's not 10 times, but damn, maybe 7 or 8 now? Some ridiculous amount. Once again, I've burned brain cells. It's okay. I love them. That band, of course, is Between the Buried and Me, and the album is Colors 2. Sharing a similar theme with Mastodon, Colors is one of the greatest metal albums, one of my favorite metal albums, one of the, if not the most important album in Between the Buried and Me's career, because it was like their masterpiece, their piece de resistance. And so you think, what a bunch of cocky mother truckers to go around and say they're gonna come out with Colors 2. One of two things goes on in my mind. Are they full of shit and they're just gonna put out a album and say it's Colors 2 because they know people will buy it if it has the name Colors on it and they don't care? Or are they actually going to push themselves and put out just this album that rivals Colors? I feel like they put out an album that rivals Colors. They are a band that is about as well thought out as far as composition and songwriting goes that you are gonna find, period. They are very thorough. They do extensive time changes, add-ons, shrink and grows, all these little cool, quirky, odd things that make prog so unique and special. They know it all, they know how to work it in, and they also know how to put in all the great extreme stylings of metal into that as well, and make it into a hodgepodge that's pretty much all their own and that they own damn near outright. Nobody can out BT Bam, BT Bam. If you're a fan of guitar playing, then David Gilmour should definitely be on your list, and not for his technical prowess. No one is ever going to hear David Gilmour fly through solos, but what you are going to hear David Gilmour do is hang on the beautiful notes that tug at your heartstring, and he is one of the best, if not the best, at doing just that. There is a old Pink Floyd track called Marooned on the Division Bell, I believe, and that was during a time where Roger Waters wasn't a part of the band, and David Gilmour was really the head creative unit of that band. Long story short, the track Marooned is this beautiful keyboard part with just this singing, flowing guitar line. There's a track on here that, once again, it's a weird word. I'm going to try to pronounce it. Sfumato. I think I got it that time. That is almost to me like the space age version of it. It has this really beautiful synth, this beautiful melodic progression, and my boy Wagner is playing beautiful David Gilmour leads, like straight up, just like going right to the David Gilmour wheelhouse and just tugging at every heartstring. That grabs me, that's special to me. I even listened to it on the way over here just to get that excited feeling again. Another thing that really grabs me about this album is their way that it almost mirrors Colors. So the track after Sfumato is a song is the last track. God, this hair. There we go. Human as Hell, another one with love. And that is the last track. Also, White Walls is the last track of Colors. The riff and the rhythm of that song is very reminiscent of White Walls, and they do that a lot. They are able to cleverly reference so many old things from Colors 1, but make it into something new. So it's not repeating the same stuff, but there's enough of the melodic notes and nuances in there to easily suggest that they are referencing that and turning it into something new by creating Colors 2. I thought that nothing could ever do that. I thought it was cocky. I thought it was downright arrogant. But damn, did they prove me wrong. Colors 2 is an absolute masterpiece of progressive metal music. I definitely think that it is mission accomplished as far as setting out what they wanted to do, and that was make an album that was worthy enough to have the Colors name on it, and I think they did just that. From top to bottom, Tommy Giles, Briggs, Wagner, all them guys are just at the top of their games. They're not going anywhere, and they continue to put out music that shocks and amazes me. If you are a fan of progressive music at all, You absolutely have to hear this album, and if you haven't, then you definitely deserve to be sprayed wet with the hose in a cage. That's all there is to it. So, that pretty much wraps up my top 10 list of 2021 favorite albums. This year, a lot of excellent music was put out. 2020 was a year where everyone was forced to stay home and sit and stew, and some people dealt with it and some people didn't deal with it, but I'm glad we all made it through. So we're here together now talking about music. And with that being said, a lot of our favorite bands and artists, they took that downtime and they just started writing and creating. And 2021 was a year of excellent music. We had no shortage of excellent music being released week after week in multiple genres. Kudos to every musician and band that put out something this year, because we needed it after a year like 2020. 2020 still had some good music, but nobody's really feeling good about anything in 2020. So I think 2021 was an important year, and although we're not still back to normal as far as what we know normal to be pre-COVID, but I think 2021 was a step in the right direction as we continue to move towards some normalcy. And what a better way to try to do that than with the soundtrack to our lives, and for us that is metal. So, being at the end of December, I want to wish you all a very happy holidays. I hope you guys, no matter what happens this year, I hope that the following year is nothing but come-ups and glow-ups and ups of any kind that you want and can imagine. May you only go up, up, and only up. So that about wraps up the video. If you like this video, please give it a like. If you're not subscribed to our channel, please subscribe. I would greatly appreciate it. Also, it lets you know when we put out new material, which is pretty much all the time. If you'd like to support us online, there's a link down below to our Patreon. It's just $2 or $3 a month, and that helps us continue to provide awesome content to you. Also, we still have just a few shirts left. If you would like to get a shirt for your loved ones for that special Christmas stocking stuffer, please send an email to thrallsofmetal@gmail.com with the title shirts, and we will get you an invoice. On behalf of me and all my metal cohorts, happy holidays, raise the roof, pump the iron, all that jazz. Have a safe, happy, and metal-filled holiday. Now go fuck off somewhere.